Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Perdue, and I am a nerd, and we are coming to you live from the palatial broadcast suite high atop the Attorney Computer Systems Tower in beautiful downtown Dundee, Michigan, where it's a balmy 82 degrees, and it is not raining for the first time in 8 days. Today, we are here for the May 2011 water cooler, which is our affectionate name for the virtual user group meeting for Tabs3 and PracticeMaster users. And I would like to direct everyone's attention to the lower right-hand corner of the screen, where you will see that it is 1 minute past 1 o'clock. This is a record for us so far this year. It's the first time we've been ready actually 2 minutes ahead of time instead of 5 minutes late, so I want everyone to take note of that. Oh, it's 1:02. Better get going. Today we are going to talk about two things, as usual. I'm going to talk about our new people file concept in PracticeMaster, and Mary Jo is going to talk about an oldie but a goodie, unallocated funds, because people still have them and people still shouldn't have them, so we're going to talk a little bit more about them. But before we do that, I'm going to direct your attention, and I forgot to load my handy-dandy little screen, so I'm just going to describe to you that on the right of your screen, there should be a box that is the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar control panel. You either have the full control panel that would take about a quarter or a third of your screen, or you have a little teeny box with some icons, maybe 3 or 4 icons in it. You will notice that that box is there even if the big one's showing. It's just off to the left. And at the top of those 4 or 3 icons is an arrow type icon that either points to the left or the right. If it's pointing to the right, that means that clicking it will get that big box out of the way. It'll push it over to the right off your screen. If it's pointing to the left, that means you can't see that big box, but if you click it, it means you'd like to, and it will bring that big box into focus. There are 2 things that you might want to do in that big box. One is to type a question, and there is a questions section, so you merely type a question, and our lovely hostess, Leanne, will find your question, read it, make sure it gets answered, or you can raise your hand. You'll notice that in that little box with the icons in it is an icon that looks kind of like a hand with something that looks kind of like an arrow that's pointing sort of upwards, meaning raise your hand. And that means you're not shy and you want to ask your question live. So raise your hand, and eventually Leanne will call on you, if you will, and she'll unmute you. You can ask your question, we'll answer it, and she'll make sure that you get your question answered, and then she'll mute you again so that you can continue to eat your delicious salty snacks that crunch too much and therefore cause us to mute everyone. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the lovely Mary Jo Blum, who, by the way, is now engaged to Matthew what? Boyd. Oh, come on, don't give me that. She's embarrassed. Who is now engaged to Matthew Boyd and will be getting married in a few short months. So the next time you talk to her on the phone, be sure to congratulate her. Mary Jo is here to talk about unallocated. Take it away, Mary Jo.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about unallocated payments today and what they are and how to handle them when you get them. First of all, if you have a version 14 or later of our software, you'll notice that there was a new feature added called unallocated payments. Not necessarily a new feature, but just a way to deal with them. Before, you didn't really see what was going on or what they were, but now you do. Whenever you have a credit balance for a client and you have not billed for that fee or whatever it was, Tabs needs a place to put that to hold it until it knows how to bill for it. When you're preparing a bill, a statement, Tabs goes out and looks and says, oh, well, here's $100 in fees, or here's $50 in costs, and then it goes ahead and applies it and allocates it appropriately. If you haven't prepared that statement, it doesn't know yet. It's out in WIP, and it needs to look at that when you prepare the statement. So the unallocated, you can look at that as a temporary place to hold credit balances until you update a statement and actually allocate it through that method. So how do you get them? How do you get rid of them? How do they accumulate? How do you keep track of those unallocated payments? First of all, I'm going to show you a report that you can just go right into and see what you have right now. What do you have out there in unallocated payments? And I'm going to get into tabs here. And we're going to go into our reports. And under our management reports, we have an unallocated payments report. So if you want a quick down and dirty list of what do you have out there at this point in time, you can click on that and you can just run this for whatever. I've got an old version of our data here, so I don't even know what's going to come up here, but I'm just going to leave it open. And you can run this report and preview it, and this will give you a list of all of the clients that you've taken payments in, but you might not necessarily have billed for them and actually allocated that money. So here I've got a couple it's filling in real quick. This is definitely 2009, 2008 data that we had actually billed and then just not prepared statements for, or maybe there was a statement for part of the money, but not all of it that had come in. So these are just kind of our list here on the end of all the unallocated payments that have come in. So once you see that and you have this on a list, you can start going through and say, is this really legitimately unallocated? Well, what is legitimate unallocated money? A lot of times you might have a contingent case that comes in and you're putting time out there, but you might get a retainer payment in, or you might have trust money that comes in, and you don't know what to do with it. And some firms just go ahead and dump that right into the operating money. It's a retainer that they're billing against that is not going to be refundable. It's a non-refundable retainer, and that goes right into your operating account. But you really haven't billed for that time yet. Or you may have money that comes in that is actually IOLTA money, and you're depositing it over in IOLTA, and then when you earn it, you're going to be allocating it that way. So there's two different types of unallocated money that can come in and where you're putting it. If it is retainer money that hasn't been earned yet, but yet you're going to, it's non-refundable, you can put it in client funds to take care of this, but if you just had went in and just put it in as a payment, it's going to show up as a credit balance, and it's going to show up as unallocated here. So when you're looking through this, if we looked at our first one here and decided that this $547 that was unallocated was actually money that had come in our case, we have prepaid minutes, so that could be prepaid minutes amount that could come in, and that would need to be either moved to our client funds so that we can keep track of it there, or maybe it's going to be trust money that we would move over and get it out of the unallocated. So you really don't want money that's over there sitting as an unallocated payment in tabs. So you can kind of go through and just see if any of these are actually legitimate. Maybe there is one down here, the law office of Sandra Larson. Maybe in this case, we knew that we got the payment in and we were going to do work, or bill for that work the next day or next week or, whenever that would be. So we know that that's money that we've earned that we were just going to bill for it, and as soon as we bill for it, it was cleared out of there. So that's something that you might know that a case is going to be settled, or you've got the money in and it's going to actually be applied when you prepare the statement, and it's not that far off. But if it's something that's sitting out there and it's going to be there for quite some time, you really don't want to have that carrying over. You've got to decide, well, is that something that needs to go into trust, or is it something that we should be putting into client funds? So this is the first place to start, is to see what you have out there and then determine whether this is old stuff that should be cleaned up. Maybe you just never prepared a statement. That happens quite a bit with flat fees. Maybe you got a flat fee in for a certain case, and you just never prepared a bill for it. So the client has a payment, but there was never a bill to tell tabs how to allocate that payment. So just going in and simply creating a fee statement for that amount and updating it will clear that out as well. So there's a lot of different reasons that you could start getting these unallocated, and if you're confused or have questions on why something is showing up on an unallocated payments report, you can give Paul or I a call. We'd be glad to look over that with you and, find out the reasons behind it. But those are the most common.
Mary Jo.
Question, Leanne?
Yes, there's a question from Sharon. In addition to congratulations, Mary Jo.
Thank you.
Sharon would like to know, how about transferring unallocated from one client's matter to another? How do you do that?
Okay, there's a couple different ways. It's going to depend on whether or not that payment has been, if it's for the full amount of the payment, or if it is a payment that has already been billed and included on a statement. If you've done that and that was still unallocated, you didn't have enough time to bill, so it was just keeping that unallocated as a credit balance. So there's a lot of different ways. If it's simply a WIP payment, you can go in and you can, and it's for the full amount. You maybe just applied the full amount of the check to the wrong client. You can go in and do a transfer transaction. And then you can actually transfer that payment from one client to another. If it's not for the full amount and it's still in WIP, you can actually delete the payment and then re-enter it and put it, split it between the two clients. If it's a payment that has come in and it has been billed, then you would need to do a payment adjustment. And under maintenance, transaction related, we have payment adjustment, and you can actually go in and you can tell it, you know, that you have to refund that money or reverse that payment, and then put it onto the correct client. We now, in version 16, also have, if you did a reversal, of course I've got a client that can't be found. I don't even know if we've got somebody out here that has a payment. This is such old data. But so if you did have a payment out here, there's a new option that you can actually transfer it right to client funds as well. So, and you can, or you can tell it which client you want to transfer to right here in the payment adjustment window. So when you choose reversal in the next screen, it opens up a box that will tell you, you know, where do you want to put this? Do you want to change it to client funds? Do you want to change it to another client? Any of those things there. Any other questions? Okay. The other thing that you're going to want to make sure that you set up is your integration to tell Tabs, if you're using general ledger software, where you want that to go. So you should have a GLS account set up for unallocated payments or unapplied payments or something like that. And there's two ways to set that up. We have some clients that keep that as a liability account because it's not technically money that you have earned, and they don't want to show it on their fee income for this year, so it goes out to a separate unallocated payments GLS account. They keep it as a liability, and then as it's earned, as you update those statements, it will go ahead and Tabs will automatically go out to GL, pull it out, and put it into the proper account. So it'll pull it out of unallocated and put it to fee income or cost income, and it will split it for you out there. And then it keeps that running balance, being that it's a liability account. The beginning or the ending balance for the year will carry over, and then you still have that at the beginning of the year because it's still unallocated money. And even though you got the payment in, you know, November, you may not actually bill for it until January, February the next year. Or if it's a contingent case, maybe not even for, you know, who knows how long. So when the case settles. So that is something that you can consider if you want to keep that running balance. Some of our other clients actually do want to show it as income. So they set up their unapplied payment account as an income account. And then that actually clears at the end of the year. It shows as income in the year, the current year that it was actually brought in, even though it's still unapplied in Tabs until you prepare that statement. So there's two different ways there that you can set up your GLS integration account. And then when you come in here to your integration, and under GLS integration, you've got configure your payment integration, and then you can post your unapplied. And it's the same thing that you can do with your fees and your costs. You've got the same breakdowns as far as single debit credit or, you know, by category, location, code, timekeeper. And then you just go ahead and you map your accounts in the unapplied payments account button here, and then you can just go ahead down and decide where you want those to go. And that will, you know, whatever account you set up in GL will tie directly here, and it's automatic. You don't have to worry about going back in and you updated a statement, now you got to move the money in GL. It's all automatic, and it goes through on its own.
Mary Jo?
Mm-hmm.
This is all for the newest version, version 16?
No, this is all available in the current version 15, except for on the payment adjustment screen that I talked about where you can actually apply it to client funds directly. That is in 16. So if you go there, payment adjustment on the second screen, if you've got 15 or older, it's not going to give you that option to just go ahead and throw it to, you know, client funds or another client. It's going to either reverse it or just make an adjusting entry in Tabs so that it's gone. So that's something to be aware of. That's the only feature there that I've talked about today that's not available in a prior version. So any other questions there? Okay. There's one last thing, and I've just lost my whole train of thought on it. So I know, you get engaged, and look what happens. All right, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you. If I think of it, I'll interrupt you. But I think I've covered everything. If you have questions, just let me know and pop them in there.
So the important thing to remember is if you have unallocated and you know why you have them, that's fine. But if you have them and you don't know why you have them or you're not handling them properly, then it's something to be concerned about. And Mary Jo just got her train of thought back on the track.
I just thought of it. What I wanted to show you real quick is where do you put those unallocated when they do come in for client funds. We talked about if you have a non-refundable retainer, when you take a payment in, you can actually code that as a client funds payment and put it in. I'm sorry, I'm putting to the regular payment screen. If you go into your client funds, and they moved it here with this new version. Client funds. I've lost it.
Go up to transactions.
Transactions, there we go. I'm just like lost. Client funds. If you click here, you can actually enter a deposit into your client funds from here, and it will show, you can still integrate that in version 16 into your GLS, map it out like I just showed you, or you can go ahead and make the payment, and it will go over into GL, and on your, when you make your deposit slips and stuff, they can actually show up under client funds over there too. So it's actually mapping to your bank account. It's just that you can code it as a client funds payment, and then you can keep track of that and actually pay yourself out of client funds when you prepare your statement as well. So when it's still in WIP, you can still go in to client funds and you can disperse that just like you can in trust, but it's actually going into your operating account instead of client funds. So keep that in mind. If it's non-refundable retainer money and it's going into the operating, deposit it right into client funds. It still goes against the client's account. It's still there. You can still post against it. If it's or if it's just regular IOLTA money, just put that right into your trust account. I think that's explaining it.
I think so.
I hope so. So
Works
if
for
I
me.
missed that, give me a call and I will explain it
Of course,
further.
if anybody has questions, you can email either me or Mary Jo, and we can provide further explanation. I am going to talk about PracticeMaster, and I'm going to talk about people. One of the things that lawyers really want to do with practice management is identify the people that are associated with the matter and be able to work with that relationship between people and matters. For one thing, they want to be able to go into a matter and see all the people that are associated with the matter. Who's the opposing attorney? Who's co-counsel? Who's the defendant? Maybe there's 7 defendants and 3 of them are ours. Who's the plaintiff? Who are the experts? Who are the fact witnesses? Now, this is kind of a concept thing. It's been made a little bit stronger by version 16, and I'll talk about how. We're, of course, in 15 right now. But so we've always been able to do this, but it's something that Mary Jo and I have developed over the last 6 months, 8 months, as what we call a best practice. In older implementations of PracticeMaster that we've been involved with, if I can get Mary Jo to stop moving the mouse, when you go into a client, you will find people all over the place. Now, we don't have it here because we don't work with areas of practice, but if you're working with PI or litigation-related areas of practice or workers' comp, when you go in, you may get tabs that say things like identify who the medical providers are. If you're working with an estate planning area of practice, you might have a tab for the trustees or the executors or the children or the grandchildren. If you're working with a bankruptcy type of area of practice and you're on the debtor side, you might have a tab that lists all the creditors. If you are working with virtually any type of litigation, you'll have a place where you identify the opposing attorney. You might have a place where you identify co-counsel. Now, that's great. It's great. We've always been able to do that, and that's always the way we've done it. We've had it a distinct place for every type of person, and those people would go in their places. You'd click on the tab for medical providers, and that's where the medical providers would go. You'd click on the tab for children, and that's where the children would go. Problem with that, it gets confusing. There's different places for the same person depending on which area of practice you're in, or depending on how you've set it up. There are a whole bunch of different places to go. As we go from one firm to another, we'll find the same thing in different places all over the place. Lawyers really want, we have found, a single place to find all the people. So what we started doing about 8 months ago is creating a people tab. And in the people tab, we are able to add people. Now I'm going to go real quickly to our Scooby-Doo case, Scooby-Doo Incorporated actually. And I'm going to go over to the people tab. and I'm going to hit the new icon, and I'm going to add a new person. And what I'm doing here is I'm tying one person from our contact file or our related parties file to one matter, the Scooby-Doo test client procedures matter. This might be any matter. This is the client here, and this is the matter. So I'm going to go pull out, let's see if we have any Purdue's in here. It's very likely we do. We'll say that Bill Purdue is opposing counsel. And although it may be a conflict of interest, I'm going to go save that. And I'm going to create a new record. And I'm going to say that Dave Purdue, my other brother, is co-counsel. And I'm going to say that Mary Jo Blum is one of the defendants. And we'll make things simple. We'll say that this is a case that has just two defendants, so we'll also identify, gosh, who else is in here? We'll pick on Kurt Lindauer, my old neighbor, and now an attorney. We'll say that he's the other defendant. Now we'll go back into Mary Jo's record, because now you'll notice that I've got all my people here. And for some reason we don't have a column layout that really defines it. Hold on one second. I got it, Mary Jo. Bear with me for 1 second. I have the wrong column layout selected. The cobbler's children have no shoes. Okay. So we didn't quite create the column layout. We were on time by 2 minutes, but we forgot to do something. But that's all right. So we have a column layout that, if you'll bear with me for 1 second, everybody talk amongst yourselves while I very quickly go over here and create a new column layout for the people file, and we'll call it people 2 since we already have a people 1, and we will edit people 2 real quick and throw the right fields in. Hopefully you're still talking amongst yourselves. If Bill Purdue is here, he's probably asking if Baron Henley will be presenting, so I'll just answer that question for you now, Bill. Baron Henley will not be presenting today. And I'm going to find role. So we want to know who they are, what their role is, and maybe just their telephone number. That's, I think, enough for now for you guys to get the idea. Of course, we'd set up a column layout that really made sense. And I'll very quickly change to people 2. And so now we can see that, hold on 1 second, we don't have the right field in there. I got the wrong last name field. All the way down. Right here. Okay. Bill Purdue is opposing counsel. Dave Purdue is co-counsel. Mary Jo Blum is defendant. Kurt Lindauer is also the defendant. We have, as you'll see, if I go into a new record, we have a whole bunch of roles defined, and these, again, are part of our best practices. This is what we found have been good roles. If you're going to do a lot of estate planning, you'll have things like accountant and child and grandchild. Okay? If you do workers' comp in Indiana, you might have hearing member. You might have medical panel chair and medical panel member. I think those things are specific to workers' comp within the state of Indiana. You always have expert witnesses and fact witnesses, and we define them differently. Obviously, one is somebody that saw or experienced something, whereas the other is somebody that has some special knowledge. We have defendants and plaintiffs. When we originally started developing this concept, we had our plaintiff and other plaintiffs, and our defendant and other defendants. But actually what we did over the long haul was we allowed us the ability to go back in and say that Mary Jo is the person that we represent, Kurt Lindauer is another defendant, so we mark Mary Jo as ours. And then we can tell at a glance that Mary Jo is our defendant, but this Kurt Lindauer guy is a defendant, but he's not one that we're representing. So this allows us to take all the people and put them in one place in PracticeMaster, and we can still do all the wonderful things we could do with people before. One of the things that comes in here is referrers. If somebody refers, if you get a lot of referrals from people, referrer is one of the things you'll want to track in the people file. It allows us to do things like have a multiple opposing counsel, because in earlier implementations of PracticeMaster for some of our clients, there was only one opposing counsel field, and sometimes there's more than one opposing counsel. It allows us to define a role of, and we don't have it here, but we would typically put, if your firm was Attorney Computer Systems, we'd have a role of ACS responsible attorney, ACS assisting attorney, ACS responsible paralegal, ACS assisting paralegal. That's, of course, assuming that Attorney Computer Systems is a law firm. And therefore, unlike the tabs fields of primary and secondary timekeeper, where you only have one primary and one secondary, you could have 2 responsible and 4 assisting attorneys. It allows us to link up the opposing counsel with the plaintiffs and say, well, this person represents this plaintiff. It allows us to do a lot of things that we could never do before, while retaining all the features of using related parties and contacts that we've always had. Leanne?
Paul, Mary wants to know, would you be able to add or edit the role listing?
Oh, yeah. Now, we've defined the role list as a drop-down, and we really don't like to do anything except limit it to that drop-down, because we feel that if people start defining roles on the fly, it gets very messy. A drop-down does require that somebody go in and edit the drop-down in order to add roles, but it's very simple to do. And so these are just the roles that we kind of pump in there to begin with, but always when we do an implementation, a firm will come back and say, well, we need this role, and we want to kind of change the focus of this role. So this is a way for us to kind of very free-form associate people with cases. And by using the role, all we have to do is point to the right person and point to the right role, and we are taking a person from the contact or related parties file, associating with this case under a specific role. And by doing it that way, somebody can fill many, many roles for many, many different cases. Maybe Bill Perdue's an attorney, and for this case we've got him tagged as opposing counsel. For these 2 cases we've got him tagged as co-counsel. For this case over here he happens to also be an arbitrator, so we've got him tagged as an arbitrator. And let's say he also got an accounting degree and he does a little bit of accounting, legal-related accounting work on the side. So for these 2 estate planning cases he's tagged as an accountant. And he also refers us cases, so for these 4 cases he's tagged as a referrer. And yet we see them all in the same place. We pull up a matter, we go to the people file, we see all the people that are associated with the case right there. And of course, you know that I fumbled a little bit with the layout. Where did I end up here? I fumbled a little bit with the layout, but let me go back to Scooby-Doo. I'm not even in the meeting, no wonder. I'm back on my screen. I fumbled a little bit with the layout, but this layout will show you the things that are relevant. So you got phone number, maybe what city they're in is relevant, certainly what role. Hours would be something that we would have, not hours as in 2 hours or 3 hours, but hours as in our defendant versus not our defendant, our plaintiff versus not our plaintiff. So you'd want hours right here, so we'll be able to see right at a glance that Mary Jo is our defendant and that Kurt Lindauer is not our defendant. That really gives a nice, clean representation, and that's half the battle when it comes to paralegals and especially attorneys in practice management. Most of the time what they want to see is who's involved, how are they involved, how can I get them on the phone, how can I send them an email very quickly. Okay, and that's our concept for today. Mary Jo gives us our substance, I give us our concept, and I guess the rest is up to you. So until next month, if there are no more questions, Leanne, nothing? We're all set? Okay. Until next month then, we will let you guide us. If you have by the way, if you have a suggestion for something we should talk about at the virtual user group meeting, we are always looking for things that people would like to hear us talk about. Send those suggestions to either me or Mary Jo. You can pretty much send an email to virtually anything at attorneycomputersystems.com. So you could send, for instance, an email to, why don't they cover the topic that I want to, at attorneycomputersystems.com, or you could just go straight to me, paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, at attorneycomputersystems.com. I think we have one question.
Mary wants to know when, if ever, will Tabs integrate into WordPerfect?
I would have to say never. There's several reasons for that. Tabs does integrate, well, I should say PracticeMaster does integrate with WordPerfect through HotDocs. That's the only way that currently we can do it, because WordPerfect doesn't have a strong enough language or programming interface, if you will, to support the document assembly. There are other ways to integrate with WordPerfect. We are putting PracticeMaster in a firm in a couple of weeks that uses WordPerfect, but they didn't want to buy HotDocs for everyone, and so they didn't. And they all have Word because they have to have it to, and this of course is something that has to be. They have Word on their desktop because they get a lot of documents in that are Word. So we've written all the document assembly projects, all the documents that they can assemble within PracticeMaster in Word using the direct link between PracticeMaster and Word. And they either print them and don't save them if it's just a quick letter, or they save them in WordPerfect, because in Word you can save in a WordPerfect format, and that's working very well for them. Right? It has so far in our testing. So there's that way. You can assemble directly to Word and then simply save in a WordPerfect format. You can assemble documents to WordPerfect. You do have to have HotDocs in the middle. But I will say that they'll never integrate directly because of two factors. One, WordPerfect doesn't have what it takes to be able to do that. And two, WordPerfect, unfortunately, is a product that seems to be continue to lose market share, and eventually, like it or not, I don't think it will be around. And so the people at STI have chosen pretty much to focus on Word. Is that it for questions, Leanne? Okay. Until next month. Oh, we have a thank you. You're welcome. Until next month, we are Attorney Computer Systems, Mary Jo, the proudly almost married, newly engaged. Me, I'm just the guy that's trying to lose weight, and Leanne's the new chick that's answering all the questions. We remain faithfully dedicated to serving your every computing need until next month. Next month we will be back on track. We're a week early this month, last Monday of the month, 1 o'clock. And again, if you have any suggestions for topics, let us know. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, everybody.